most of the times when you go for interviews, they'll ask you questions about POA&Ms because it's a big thing. POA&Ms. POA&Ms are plan of actions and milestones. So they are things that you do to track findings after an assessment. So an assessor comes in, the assessor conducts a security control assessment on the security controls for the system. And after the assessment, the assessor documents the list of controls that failed. And they document this in what's called the security assessment report. So a POA&M is to track those controls that failed listed in the security assessment report and plan on how to mitigate or remediate those findings. So with a POA&M, you'll have the scheduled completion date, the scheduled start date, the cost to fix it, the person responsible, the POC responsible for fixing it, what the issue is, how to resolve the issue. So as a risk management professional, you want to make sure that you're on track with the dates and making sure that those dates do not slip, make sure that the POA&Ms do not get delayed. So most of the times when you go for interviews, they'll ask you questions about POA&Ms because it's a big thing. All right. So some of the questions you could get asked is, do you have any POA&M experience? Be very careful when you answer this question. If you do not have POA&M experience, please state that you do not have POA&M experience, but you're willing to learn. You're a fast learner, you pick things up quickly, because it will go downhill from there. If you say I've got 5 years of experience working on POA&Ms, they will ask you questions. And if you're not able to answer those questions, you know what will happen. So first question will be, do you have any experience? Yes, let them know. And if you do not have that much experience, just let them know as well. That will dictate the next set of questions. So what I advise you to do is be honest in your interviews. So the next question they could ask you is, what tool do you use to manage POA&Ms? So we have GRC tools, governance, risk, and compliance tools that you use to manage POA&Ms. So one of those tools is CSAM, another one is Exacta, the other one is Risk Archer. There are other ones that you could use as well, but those are the three main or common ones. So you can let them know, yeah, I use CSAM, Exacta, Risk Archer, especially if you do have the experience with those tools. The other question they could ask you is, how do you make sure that a POA&M is not delayed? And the way you can answer this question is making sure that you communicate with the stakeholders, hey, this POA&M is about to get delayed a week before the due date, or 2 weeks before the due date, or whatever time frame. But make sure that you let the stakeholders know ahead of time. And you could also let them know that you gauge your project team based on their responses in the past. So if they're a project team that's responsive, you could let them know 2 weeks or a week in advance. If they're a team that is not responsive, then you give them 3 weeks in advance or so. The other question they could ask you is, how do you close POA&Ms? So closing POA&Ms would be looking at the assessment the assessor statement, so what the assessor says you need to do to remediate the findings. So it's also called remediation actions. You look at that and you provide the evidence that the assessor has requested for. So you provide the evidence, upload the evidence to the GRC tool, or a SharePoint site or a location where the assessor could see it, and submit the POA&M through the GRC tool, and the assessor will review and close. Just to go back to the previous question about, well, what do you use to track POA&Ms? Yeah, you can use the GRC tool, but some companies that are not as mature may not have GRC tools and may use Excel. So there might be a situation where you use Excel to track and manage POA&Ms. The other question you could get asked is, what do you do with the different impacts? Like, what are the different impacts levels of POA&Ms? So you can answer that they could be low, they could be moderate, they could be high. Now, mind you, there are some POA&Ms that come out of vulnerability scans, and in that case, they could be critical, they could be high, they could be medium, not moderate, and they could be low. So be mindful of that. So those are usually vulnerability scan related POA&Ms. And then sometimes, especially with CSAM, sometimes they might have high, very high, medium, low. So the very high could be synonymous with critical. So those, in a nutshell, are some of the questions you could get asked regarding POA&M management.
The Risk Management Framework, also known as the RMF. This is based on NIST 800-37. So remember that for the exam, based on NIST 800-37. Another key point to take away here is that there are 7 steps to the RMF, starting with step 0, which is the prepare phase. The prepare phase is done at every phase of the RMF, and it's done to begin the RMF activities, to prepare for the RMF activities. Then the next one is categorize. This is when you categorize the information system to know if it's considered a low system, moderate system, or high system. And once you get that determination, then you select the security controls that pertains to that particular system categorization. And the guidance for that is NIST 800-53. Then the next phase will be to implement. So once you've selected the security controls, then you implement those security controls. Once those security controls have been selected, then an independent assessor comes out to assess those security controls. And that will be the 4th phase of the RMF. And going on to the 5th phase of the RMF, once the assessor has assessed the security controls in phase 4, the assessor will let you know what passed or failed and itemize this in a SAR, security assessment report. Then for the 5th phase, the authorized phase, you take the security assessment report, the system security plan, and the POA&Ms, plan of actions of milestones, or you can call all 3 of those items the security package, and this gets briefed to the authorizing official, who will then give or grant the system an authority to operate, an ATO. Then the next phase is the monitor phase. This is when you monitor for any changes to the system or environment. Remember, this whole thing is based on NIST 800-37. And all you need to know for your exam is the things that I've mentioned so far.
So reviewing the SSP, when we talk about reviewing the SSP, there are certain things you could do in the interview, talk about in the interview when reviewing an SSP. You tell them, hey, I reviewed the SSP for accuracy. I reviewed the SSP to make sure that the dates were aligned, the POCs were correct. I reviewed the SSP for grammar issues or spell checks. So those are the types of things you could do when reviewing the SSP. Submitting the SSP is a part of the process where you submit the SSP for either for an assessor to review. You submit the SSP for the system owner to review and sign. So you submit the SSP for signatures to be obtained. Okay, question you could get asked about how you worked on SSPs or SSPs in general is who signs the SSP? Who signs the SSP? So there is a signature block for the SSP, and typically the system owner signs, the ISSO signs, the authorizing official signs on the SSP. Now, for your organization, you could have other signatories like the privacy officer, the chief information security officer could have a signature block as well. But just know that those are the common signatories on an SSP. Question you could get asked about an SSP could be the system categorization. So they could ask you a question like, what types of SSPs do you work with? Or what types of templates, if you mentioned that you use templates, what types of templates did you work with? Were they high, moderate, or low? So this is where you would answer, yeah, I typically worked on low systems, moderate systems, and then you could go into categorization just to let them know that you're familiar with the concept of system categorization.
Multi-factor authentication deals with three factors: something you know, something you have, something you are. So something you know could be your username and password. The other factor would be something you have. So an RSA token or PIF card. Then something you are would be your biometrics, so your fingerprint, your facial recognition. That will be something you are.
Question you could get asked about working on SSPs is, what are the common problems you've seen with SSPs? What are the common issues you've noticed in SSPs? And this question could get answered by saying, hey, most common question I see is wrong implementation descriptions, or wrong information, or outdated information. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Thanks.
Don't forget to subscribe and like. We're also on IG at CyberFirst Solutions. Thank you.